Okay, we're going to give you a quick introduction to VCarve Pro. So you're going to want to look for the icon, like what is right here in the middle of my screen. Kind of looks like two blue flags and says VCarve Pro 10.5. So we're going to click on that and open it up. And it's going to look like this when we first come into it. VCarve is a program where we can do some drawing, but also where we do the toolpathing or the CAM output for any of our three CNC routers. So over here on the left, I'm going to click where it says create a new file. And it's going to come up with our job setup tab. Now it should default to job type being single-sided. That's what we want. For our job size, we're going to have to put in whatever our material size is that we're working with. For right now, I'm going to leave the width at 12. I'm going to make the height 6. Thickness, I'm going to say 0.5. Okay, and you see this right here changes. For the Z0 position, we want that to be the material surface, so that's the top of the material. You see if I click machine bed, it moves it down. We always do the top of the material. XY datum position is where our 0, 0 is, where our X and Y axis intersect. Typically, we're going to have it either in the lower left or we're going to have it in the middle. Okay, in different jobs, we would do that different. If we have a board and we want to carve say we want to carve some text right in the middle of the board, we would typically use the center. If it's something where we're going to do some carving and then we're going to cut it out also on the router, we would typically go with the lower left. And that's something that we can play around with and change a little bit as we go. So if we hit OK, you can see it brings up this tab here where we have some create vectors, where we can do some drawing, some transform, some edit, etc. So in here, this is where we're going to do a lot of our work before we get ready to add toolpaths. And just what a few of these are: new file, open. We can import vectors. So if we draw something in Rhino, we can export it as a DXF, and then we can bring it into or import it into VCarve. We can bring in a bitmap, so a picture that we want to trace. What I have found is that VCarve does a better job with colored photos or colored pictures than Rhino's vectorized does. If it's black and white, they both work about the same, but colors, VCarve does work a little better. If, as we're going through, we need to change some of our parameters here, maybe we get to draw on something and then we double check, wait a sec, our board's a little bit bigger than I thought, or it's thicker, this is where we could go back and modify that. Down here we have some different drawing tools. These first 5 up here and then these first 3 down here, those allow us to draw different things. Circle, oval or ellipse, rectangle or square, polygon, star, just a line, an arc, or a curve. Okay. Typically we'll do most of that in Rhino, but it might be something where we want to do a sign and we're just going to do a quick border around it, and we want an oval or an ellipse, so we might choose to do that. This next row here has to do with text and modifying text. VCarve does a much better job with text than Rhino does. In Rhino, when we create text, it comes in as curves, and if we want to modify it, we have to go through and actually change the curve, or we have to delete it and start over. One of the things that I really like about VCarve is that if we put some text in here, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll draw text. We'll say Braves. Okay, that's in there. We move it. Well, maybe we decide as we're going through we don't like that, so we can click on it. And here, when it highlights, it turns kind of a purple or a magenta type color. We can go over here to draw text. Maybe instead of Braves, we want it to say Banks. We can type it and it modifies it. Okay, real time. So it's not quite like Rhino where we have to delete it and start over. So that's one thing that I do appreciate. And you can kind of play with some of these other things. We can edit spacing, we can convert it to curves. We don't typically do that. We could draw it on a curve. This is a little bit simpler sometimes than trying to do that in Rhino. Transform, so move, set a certain size, so that's basically scaling, rotate, mirror, distort, align, and then a few edit objects. Selection mode and transform, we would often use, here's our group and ungroup buttons, and the rest we honestly don't often worry about. Now, a couple other things within here. We have a 2D view, which is this right here, and we have a 3D view, where it looks like wood. And we'll show you a little bit more of that in a second. Also over here in the upper right, we have a tab that says Toolpaths. When that pops out, if we want to keep that out, we can click on this little push pin, and then it's there. And this tab is really where we're going to spend the bulk of our time in VCarve. We have different toolpath operations. Profile, that would be where it would cut something out. So let me minimize that for a second. And we're just going to go ahead and draw ellipse in here. We're going to anchor it at 0, create, close, and I'm going to go in and move my XY datum back to the center. Highlight, and we're going to align that, and we're going to align that in the center. Okay. To pan, we have to push down on the scroll wheel, so it's not quite like Rhino in that respect. So we'll open our Toolpaths tab back up. So say I wanted to make this oval sign with banks engraved in the middle. I would click on the outer circle, go over here to Profile Toolpath, click on it, set our cut depth. Our material is 0.5 inches thick, so I'm going to set it to 0.5. Pick a tool, and we'll get into some of the stuff with tools a little bit later. Machine vectors, I want it to be on the outside of this line. We'll talk about add tabs later, and hit calculate. And what it does, you notice here, there's several lines. So we could preview this. Let's make that slower so you can see what's going on. Reset. So it's showing you, here's what it would do. It would do one cut, it's going to go a little bit deeper, it's going to do another, it's going to do another. We'll speed that up just to get through that. One more, I think. Yep. So we can rotate that, we can look. So that's what we would be left with, is this part of a sign right here. And again, that's the toolpath. Now, if I close that, we'll go back to 2D view. I'm going to click on banks, and this time I'm going to use the toolpath right below that, which says VCarve. What VCarve will do is carve in between the curves that we have in our letters. So I'll click on that. I don't need to worry anything about start depth or flat depth right now. Select the tool. I'm going to use a 60-degree quarter inch. Since that's in there, we'll get into this stuff a little later. Hit select and go down to calculate. And you can see that's all blue. It's like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Well, we could preview that. Slow that down just a little bit. Preview visible toolpath, that's the one that's selected. And what it's going to do is it's going to go in and it's going to carve in between those letters, just like it's doing now. Okay, so that's what our sign would look like if we drew this oval, put banks in there, did a profile toolpath, which is the cutout, did a VCarve toolpath, which was all this work in here. So in a nutshell, that's some of the basics of VCarve. I'll do a couple more videos for you. We'll give you a chance to play with this, but talk a little bit more about some of the toolpaths and what they do. and then we'll create another one where we'll talk about what tools we should have and have you actually put those in, and then look at some of the settings for the tools. There's some things that are kind of standard that we do, but there should be a couple of tools in VCarve already for you. So that's our first introduction to VCarve.